pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GL 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Medfield Warrant Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. As a reminder, persons who would like to listen to or view this meeting while in progress may do so by following the instructions on the agenda and meeting notice. And okay, so I think we probably have everybody from Water and Sewer out in the attendees. Does it look?
See Bill Harvey, Mo Goulet, and Randy Karg. I don't see Christian out there, but there's Bill.
So, because what I was thinking, since they're all here, we're going to do the water and sewer piece, and then Christine said that Mo is also going to talk to us about the stormwater bylaw. So we'll do all of those first, and then we will talk about the budget and potential changes to it, as well as an update on a couple of other articles, if that works for everyone. And there's Christine. Look at that.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late.
That's quite okay. I wasted time. Well,
Delayed.
I thought, there you go. So Newton, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything up front or if we just want to jump right in.
Well, welcome Water and Sewer Board, Bill, Randy, and Mo. I guess Christian is unaccounted for, but and that's not unaccounted for water. That's a bad joke, I know. Anyway, Bill, your presentation to the Board of Selectmen was outstanding. That I think will give the Warrant Committee a great understanding of the dynamics, so to speak, of the water treatment plant proposal. And I think we'll hold our questions to the end so that you can get through your presentation. And then after you depart, we'll deliberate amongst ourselves and maybe tonight be able to vote on this proposal, this warrant article. So Bill, take it away.
Okay. Spend most of my time on Teams. I'm trying to find the button for this. I'm sorry.
And I had to do a Teams today and I was completely lost and I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, Teams is my home and I get onto Zoom and I'm not sure where I am. Let me turn off some of the 27 windows I've opened. I believe this presentation is also live. We have also developed an FAQ, which embodies most of the spirit of this, maybe some anticipatory questions and answers. There are some more of the financial aspects of that in this presentation. So some of us have been through this before, and this is actually not a new project. So let me just go through the outline of what I'm going to cover. I'm going to just go over our water resources, why the project is needed, some of the alternatives that we investigated, a general timeline, just going back over the last 8 or 10 years of this project. I'll talk a little bit about the method of treatment, the general scope of the project, and then the project funding and the financials that underpin the funding through our rate model. So for everyone's review, Medfield enjoys having its own water resources. They're pulled from 2 different watersheds, from the Neponset and the Charles River watershed. We have 5 operating wells. We currently have no real treatment. We do a little bit of pH adjustment to make sure the water isn't too corrosive. Our water is actually rather pure. And if you don't move the pH up just a tiny bit, it could, kind of corrode some pipes. So the water is actually low in dissolved solids. And that's a very typical approach in the industry. We also add a small amount of chlorine to reduce microbial growth as water is moved through the infrastructure, the pipes, the tanks, and everything. We actually use a liquid version of chlorine. It's called sodium hypochlorite. It's basically bleach that you would use at home, but sourced from a different place. Our water resources, our wells are regulated by the Massachusetts DEP. They regulate they have a permitting process. They regulate the location of the wells, the design, how much on an annual basis you can pump from these wells, as well as the instantaneous pumping volume, basically the nameplate instantaneous pumping that you can do with it. They also can impose drought restrictions when they see fit, and as they saw fit this past year. They also monitor a variety of performance metrics, not just of the wells, but of our overall ability to serve the public. And one example would be how much water that's consumed per capita. That's one of, say, a half a dozen metrics that they look at, and how our water system performs to meet the needs of the public. And they also regulate the quality of the drinking water that is provided to the system. Here's Medfield. You know it, you love it. You can find it on the map pretty easily if you know this shape. But our wells are located in the top left here. This is well number 6. This is our largest single production well. We have 2 smaller wells located just off of 109 called well number 1 and well number 2. And we have 2 other operating wells called number 3 and number 4 that are not too far from one of the schools. And we used to have a well number 5, but is actually not permitted for operation. So why is this filter project needed? It has a trace level of a metal called manganese. That's not the same as magnesium. This is manganese, and it's a naturally occurring metal. It's found in the geology throughout New England and actually throughout the world. And it turns out that there are some moderate levels of dissolved manganese in well number 3. And how does it get there? Water goes through the strata, through the geology, and the manganese is in the ground naturally. And so it just kind of gets brought into the water and dissolves into the water, and it goes into the aquifer, which we pump. So the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection has an enforceable limit of 0.3 milligrams per liter of manganese. And in well number 3, we have levels around 0.3 to 0.4. So it is an action level that we have to take on that specific well. So to bring that into compliance, Massachusetts has a secondary limit, basically a target for us to hit, which is below 0.5 milligrams per liter. Milligrams per liter, it's also synonymous with ppm, if you ever hear that term. And that's what we're designing for, is to be less than 0.5 milligrams per liter. It's also important to note that there is no federal maximum contaminant level, in other words, an enforceable level from a federal basis. There are enforceable levels for other things, but we don't have those things. There are about, I think I've counted 6 or 7 different states in the United States that do have state enforceable levels for manganese. The rest of the states do not. But there are other reasons to remove manganese. When you have moderate levels of manganese like we do, it can make the water not taste. It can make it taste a little bit metallic. It can also create some like dark black mineral deposits like on your faucets and stuff like that. So from a quality of life and from an aesthetic perspective, the manganese, it's a good idea to remove it. So I actually got onto the water board when I saw that this project was coming up on a warrant back in 2012. And I went down, I've told this story all the time because it's the reason why I'm on the board. Is I asked Mike Sullivan some questions about water, and he said, "You sound like you know something about this. You should join this water board." And he made it sound like it was like a pretty cool club.
That might have happened to me.
I know. Why didn't I like not ask any questions to keep my head low? No, it's actually more than happy to contribute to the community in this way. I don't think I can contribute, maybe in any other way other than trying to find my daughter's soccer ball that goes over the net and into the woods. So we did look at, there's other actually reasons to do this project. Wells 3 and 4 do need to be rehabilitated. They do not meet their nameplate rating, which is to say that they were designed at a certain flow, and in time, they, certain things wear out and the productivity of the wells do go down. Now you can do some stopgap measures to get them to produce, and we have done some of that in the past, but in time it does make sense to replace certain parts of the well to bring them back up to their permitted design levels. In this project, we're also going to take advantage of the opportunity to actually increase the instantaneous production rate of well 3, so it has a similar flow rate of well number 6, which is our largest producer. That doesn't mean that we can produce more water on an annual basis, or if we get more thirsty because well 3 is bigger, that we can produce more water. It means on an instantaneous basis, if well 6 needs some maintenance, or we need to do some load balancing between the different water basins, we have that ability to do that. But we do have maximums on what we can pump on an annual basis, and that governs actually all of our wells. It turns out when we've been working on this project, from the development stage to right now, we're getting close to with the town's approval to go to the construction phase, that it does turn out that this particular investment is the lowest cost to produce water for the town. And also it allows the town to retain its water independence. We have investigated a couple of alternatives. A couple of years ago, we took a step back and said, maybe there's another way of doing this. How about if we go on a hunt? And we did. We went on a hunt, and we poked holes in the ground in 16 other locations in property that the town owned or had rights to occupy. And it turned out that there were no other locations that had a sufficient quantity to replace the quantity that was at well 3 and 4. The town itself actually met with the NWRA just about 4 months ago in late 2020 to investigate is that an option. And it turns out that the cost to enter the MWRA were significant. There is a single, what you would call almost a development charge or a connection charge to the MWRA network. There is also costs for us to create the infrastructure to connect to that network. And the estimates that we got from, if you combine that initial upfront cost as well as the estimates to connect, it turned out that that would be approximately 2 to 3 times the cost of the project that we are proposing here, which is roughly about $12 million. So 24 to 30 something million dollars, we thought that was not appropriate. And also the fact that we would all from there have to buy the water. So, we have right now our cost to provide water is very low, frankly. The incremental cost is about basically 5%. Our fixed costs are about 95% of our cost to make water, and the other 5% is electricity. So, and some of that also would not go away. So even if we just brought water, if the MWRA just brought a pipe and we didn't have to pay for anything, we would still have fixed costs through our existing infrastructure, our staff, that wouldn't go away, and we'd have to, pressurize it through the rest of the town. So that just the operating costs would be double. So you combine 3 times the capital and then twice the operating cost, was sort of a no-brainer that it really wasn't in the town's financial interest. And then lastly, it would be more likely that the town might be the actual buyer of the water. So there'd be commitments from the town for this sort of take or pay relationship. There's also project execution dependencies. We would depend on the cooperation of neighboring towns in order to pull off a project like that, to get it from not the nearest point, but the most compatible point that can deal with the incremental flow to come into Medfield. And the estimates that we got from our engineers would be that it would take, this entire process would probably take somewhere in the order of about 7 years. And that would not be looked on very favorably by the Massachusetts DEP, who's been giving us, a little bit of time to get this treatment plant online, to turn around and shift to the possibility of developing a project with the MWRA, and then we would have water that would be non-compliant for 7 years. So for all of these reasons, it turned out that we couldn't find another source of water locally, and even bringing it in from the MWRA didn't turn out to be not just a fiscal, but there's so much uncertainty that we, here today, there isn't any certainty in delivering that water today. But we do like the fact that the MWRA is within, the greater Boston system, and to have, another resource, another possible partner, if we ever really need to go down that road. So here's a general timeline. Going back to 2012, the town started to investigate the treatments of well 3 and 4. That's when I first saw it on a Warrant article. And then through time, the Massachusetts DEP did finalize their enforceable guideline for manganese back in 2013. We did conduct 2 different pilot studies, one in 2015 and one in 2017. Oh, by the way, these are fiscal years, by the way, these are not calendar years. So the treatment plant, as a sort of a placeholder, a big sort of nut at the end of our capital plan, it appeared in our rate models back in 2015, which means in 2015, when we were developing our rate model, we had this water treatment plant several years out there in time. So we already began to, look at the trajectory of when certain debt was coming off our books and when this debt would come on our books. What was also happening at this time was we were putting in the hospital tank. You'll remember that was about a $5.5 to $6 million project at that time. And that the board and the town deemed that to be actually of a higher criticality to get the, basically sort of take control and have our own pressurized system. The old hospital tank was actually not ours, and it was in disrepair. So during that 15 and 16 period is when we started to go through the upgrade of, putting in a new tower. And then in around 2017 and 18, we were investigating these other sources. We had we hired our consulting engineer, EPG, to prepare a preliminary design so that we can start to scope the project and get preliminary costs. And we are, I guess, at the 99.9% of the final design. We should be ready to let those specifications out for bidding. My notes escape me, but I think it's within the next week or so. It's going to be paid for with a 20-year bond. I'll go through that. But we also started an application process to go through the state revolving fund. This is actually an offshoot of when the U.S. government, when the EPA put in the Safe Drinking Water Act, they provided basically a cascading line of credit nationally, which is allocated to the states. The states manage this low interest program, and that's what this revolving fund is. You have to qualify for it. So there's actually a ranking system where the DEP looks at the different projects, and based on a variety of factors, they deem if this program is available to you, and that would mean that you would get currently over a 20-year period, it's a 2% interest rate. We applied for that, and it turned out that we were just below the line. So in other words, some projects from other communities are above us. However, it is typical for some of those projects to actually not go forward or to be set aside for another year. So there is a possibility that as we go forward in this when we go through our bonding, that we still might be able to get into this 2%. So the 20-year is about 2 to 2.5 right now. But this would be a little bit, it would definitely be more guaranteed, and I think it'll be more favorable for us. The construction is going to last about 1.5 years, and the online time is anticipated to be January of 2023 for this plant. What does it look like? Well, so it looks sort of like this sort of space age thing here. You have basically looks like a can. This is a cutaway here. The filter media, it's a special kind of sand. It's what I call classic filtration. It's not something like reverse osmosis or membranes or anything like that. This is like a granulated sand. It's a special sand, and what it does is it facilitates very fast oxidation. So what that is doing is it's taking manganese from its dissolved form. In other words, it's dissolved and you can't see it. It oxidizes it, and it sort of falls to the bottom and actually becomes a suspended particle. So it's something that the filter can grab a hold of, and it becomes filtered out. The only chemicals that would be used for this would be small amounts of chlorine and sodium hydroxide, which are the same chemicals that we use for chlorination and pH adjustment today. So this is, these chemicals are handled or ordered and handled currently today. And we are not the only community that had to put in a system like this. Here I've listed some of them down here below: Webster, Plymouth, Shrewsbury, Kingston, Topsfield, and a few others. And in that priority list that I was talking about, that state revolving fund, I'd say about 20% of the projects that are on that list have manganese as one of their primary drivers. So this is a map. It's sort of a blow up of, if I can guide you here, this is where the school is and the property that's part of the school. You'll see this demarcation here, these property lines. This property here is actually owned by the water department itself, the town itself. And the plant is going to be right here, this yellow box. And this is an exploded view here. You can see that here's the fence ring. And here we'll have outside, there'll be a generator, outside will be a generator and some propane tanks for the backup generator. And then there'll be some interconnections. There'll be connections to the wastewater line from the filter will go to our sewage plant, and the drinking water will go into our mains. So the scope of this project is we have permit applications and approvals. I believe the last one is the town's Board of Health is the last one I believe we're waiting for sign off on. The scope, in addition to permits and applications, the well 3 replacement, well 4 will also be refurbished. There'll be that building that I pointed to. And then the filtration equipment, which will be built, inside that, and that'll be commissioned. And then there'll be also a connection for water main and the pipeline for the filter backwash water, which is the wastewater that comes out of the system. So here are the financials. Let me walk you through this waterfall on your right. The building and the construction and all of the bits and pieces is just over $9 million. The engineering services for the procurement, for the project management and on-site construction is just over 1.5. And we currently have set aside about 1.37 million in contingencies. And some of that being, some of it being in engineering, but most of it being in the plant and infrastructure. How are we paying for it? So I'd like to walk you through a couple of these squiggly lines in this chart on the left. So this blue line are our revenues in time from fiscal 17, 18, 19, 20. We're currently in fiscal 21. The red line are our expenditures during that fiscal period. And this green line is our net fund balance free cash. And our target, the way we manage our free cash is that we target about $1 million in free cash because there are times where we have expenses, but also to recognize that we don't have control of our revenues because of the weather. If it rains a lot and we don't sell a lot of water, since our costs are 95%, we don't save very much by not pumping water. Quite the opposite. We have high fixed costs. So it's necessary for us to maintain a reasonable free cash, and that's what this green line here is in time. Now currently the current fiscal year, is 21. We have pretty good line of sight to this number being up to about 1.5 projected by the end of the year. And then we expect it to come down as we have expenses with this project and other expenses. How we got to this blue line here is we have been increasing our rates slowly over the last couple of years, but more specifically, in fiscal 20, we increased the rates by 5% across all tiers. And then in fiscal 21, we increased the rates by 12% across all tiers. What we expect after this current fiscal year is that the increases will go back down to the more moderate of 3 to 4% per year going forward, and that will bring us to a comfortable cash balance. So with a really big project like this and the buildup of expenses that we've had to do to get this done, we've been keeping our eye on this green line to make sure that first of all, controlling expenses and levelizing when we do projects. But lastly, also doing a check-in on we've been doing variance analysis to look at what we expected for revenues and what were the actuals. And we this year, even through the level 4 drought that really curtailed how people can use water and how much they can use, we believe we're actually going to be in pretty good financial footings with that. All of this is using right now, we're using a 20-year bond at 3%. You'd have to be a mystic to know what the actual rate is going to be when we hit the market. But rates are going up, that is for sure. Both the long end and the short end of the bond curves are going up. Some of the recent polling for projects like this of $3 to $20 million are at 2 to 2.5. So we think 3% is still conservative, but it wouldn't shock me if it does turn out to be 3% right on the nose by the time we hit the markets. And then lastly, there's that possibility of getting that 2% through the state revolving fund. So I've got some backup materials. what's been spent on this project to date. These are different warrant articles, preliminary pilots, and some engineering services. And so we've spent just over $1 million in engineering services and other services leading up to this project to date. When we look at how are we doing, are we fixing the leaks, that unaccounted for water joke that came up before, we have been doing very well. Our unaccounted for water used to be basically, I think it was close to 30%. I think it was high as 27% at one point, where that is the amount of water that didn't make it through the meters. Okay.
Because it was all underneath my driveway. Unfortunately, not kidding.
I almost said it, but I thought I better not.
I have a patch in my driveway to prove it. Yeah.
I was on mute because I was throwing you under the bus.
Yeah. I threw myself.
Yeah. But so what we've and Mo and his team have done a great job in finding leaks, and we've gotten our unaccounted for water down to around 16%, which is very good. I can tell you that's very good. In most of the developed world, if you're at 15%, that's very good. That's very good. The state would like you to hit 13%, but they always ask for more. But so when it gets to how are we doing? Do we have capacity? And this chart here shows this red line is our annual average daily pumping. So in other words, we're allowed to pump 1.52 million gallons per day as an annual average. In the summer, it's much more than that. In the winter, it's much less than that. However, when you look at it on an annual basis, you can see that in 13, 14, and 2015, it was pretty extreme from both a use pattern as well as water losses. It was very high. And as we began to attack the water losses, you can see we've come down to just over 1 million. So, I mean, I'm going to call this steady state $1.1 million. I'm sorry, 1.1 million gallons per day. This chart on the right is the cumulative effect. So when you get to 1.5, how did you get there? You can see in some years, like in 2019, this brown line, we kind of took our time getting there, right? Whereas some of these other lines, they jumped up very, very, very quickly. Like in 2015, you can see this olive line that's up here. We pumped, at that point, probably twice as much leading up to that point compared to 2019. So we believe that this is really showing where the main losses were picking up. And this is actually a metric that we look at our meetings monthly now to know how we're tracking year over year, what is the trend, and how is that trending against our permit. Just a couple other slides here. This was the pilot plant. This treatment equipment, they actually had several different filter columns to look at different flows and optimization. So this actually was a study to first verify that what we wanted to put in place would remove the manganese. And the other reason was to optimize it, is how much filter media, how big do those filters have to be? How often do we have to backwash? And also how to fine tune there's always a little bit of trade-off with certain chemicals under different conditions, temperatures and things like that. So that's what this pilot gave us great data for. So, so this is just a plot that shows where you can find some pretty high levels of manganese, and it is really all over the place. Actually, I stole this slide from the Mass DEP, who customarily stole it from the USGS. So I want to give everybody the credit there.
It's not stealing, it's best practices.
Right, yeah, exactly. I think we've paid for it a couple times, right?
There you go.
Federal and the state level. So those are my prepared remarks.
Thank you.
So the floor is open for questions from the committee.
I feel like I've been talking about water for 6 years,
Yeah.
so I don't have any specific questions, but
I know we have
There's-
some heavy hitters in our audience, but I'll get one question
yeah.
going. Bill, you mentioned the 3 warrant articles, past warrant articles. They total up about 1,035,000 or so. But the engineering services on your schematic are almost 1.6 million. Are the warrant articles part of that 1.6 million on your?
Yes,
file? Okay.
yes.
So there's about 550,000 or so that will be.
Oh, wait a minute. Let me make sure I answer the question I thought you asked.
Okay.
Can you restate it?
So in your project funding and financials on the right panel, the warrant article project cost is $12 million, and you show the blocks and how they aggregate to that. Plant and infrastructure are 9 million. Contingency is 1.37 million, and engineering services are 1.58. And I'm asking, are the prior year's warrant article totals of about $1 million, are they captured in that 1.58?
No, they're not.
No.
No, they're not. No, those other warrant articles were paid for through through operations. They weren't part of any bonding, but they were previously approved to get us to this point.
So what is in engineering services? The hiring of project management organization for us?
That's right. That's right. So there's project management. There is the their services is to manage the general contractor. There are a couple of there might be a couple of other projects that are actually bid out separately, where the town actually might self-perform some things, so that they are going to be managing more than just one body. So it could be a general contractor. It could be someone who's going to be helping with the coordination with the programming of a SCADA system, which would be a different contract that's let, as well as the forced main. The town might decide to self-perform that. So it's making sure all that is done. Then there's also the literally boots on the ground to be on site for the construction. Where those specific that specific total, we're getting the final proposal in for that. So we're actually, we have a meeting next week to go through that with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah, we're gonna get a breakdown of all those costs that leads up to the estimate. It includes the clerk of the works through the whole project, daily clerk of the works being on site, dealing with DEP to get our well 3 redeveloped and well 4 online as well. So all that's included in that estimate as well.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask a follow-up on the left panel on that same page, the project funding page, the total expenditure curve? I don't know if everyone has it in front of them or not.
I put it up. There you go.
Yeah. It shows a blip in 23. I presume that's the water treatment plant. That blip in FY23.
On the red line?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I would have thought that there'd be more a smoother result, because we're going to market, we're going to raise debt, and that the increment to expenditures would just be whatever our debt payments are. But is there something more in there?
There are a couple other things on our capital plan other than just this
Okay.
project in the next couple of years. Yeah.
But the way you've modeled out your rates and obviously the capital costs and operating costs, you will have enough to service the debt. That's a question.
I don't think I understand the question.
Your modeling of your rates this is a question, will it service the debt?
Well, that's what we try to do. We try to, well, we have to service the debt as well as the other fixed costs. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
The FAQs indicated that the bids went out yesterday, but that's not quite correct, according to your.
No, the bids, they were activated yesterday. So
Okay.
nothing has been taken out yet, but they have been posted.
Okay, very good. I'll yield the floor to my colleagues.
Anybody have any specific questions?
Just
Mr. Finn?
just one simple question. I'm sure you've been asked this before, but this will take care of wells 3 and 4. Wells 1, 2, and 6. Do you anticipate any capital repairs there in the next 3 to 5 years?
I don't anticipate, but there, some things can go bump in the night,
Sure, okay,
a motor
but
burns out. Yeah, right.
Okay.
Right. I mean, there is, we're monitoring different emerging contaminants, that are coming under review from a federal level. So, we're monitoring, what our obligations are for, meeting a variety of, I mean, there are hundreds and thousands of things that can be in water, and some of them come under the jurisdiction of both federal and state regulations.
Sure.
But to Ed's question, 1 and 2 and 6, they don't have manganese problems?
No.
Okay, that's good.
Right.
Jeremy, you've been raising your hand. Go for it.
Sure. Yeah, I just, thanks, Bill. I think that was a great presentation. Certainly lots of history there. Can attest to that personally.
It's yours too.
So yeah, there's a lot behind this project and a lot of history and documentation and need. Definitely appreciated that detailed calculation about the MWRA connection. I think that's very informative to help justify this local expense, and it's a local resource that the town can provide cheaper than essentially outsourcing. So that's great. Just have a couple of questions. One, I guess, just to help clarify, the proximity of this new treatment plant to other planned or proposed work with the relocation or not relocation of the Dale Street School and this nearby treatment plant. Has the Board of Water and Sewer and your consultant weighed in on any potential impacts or not as a result of
our consultant actually has provided a letter, a position letter about the management of stormwater and the proximity of this school and the watershed. So they have provided comment to that actually.
And what is the comment state?
They let me see if I can drum up the words to say it, but I think in total that there is not expected to be an impact to the area which the wells currently occupy.
And some of the comments were to coordinate with, if the school does go pass through, to coordinate with us for the design, especially with our force main going out to Elm Street and different facets of our construction. But there wasn't any adverse comments regarding impacts.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Also, my understanding that the Water Department currently has enough staff to operate this plant. You don't anticipate adding any staff to run and operate this facility?
When we first started, we had acquired another position. It was going to be a half day, kind of average a half a day of a staff person to operate the treatment plant. And that's why we ended up with another staff person. I believe it was 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, we ended up with that fifth person. So that was to accommodate this treatment plant.
Now, I guess maybe the most difficult one, given that this has such a long history, a lot has changed out there in the regulatory world. In one of the big changes, at least locally here in Massachusetts, is a new requirement that makes it actually a primary contaminant for PFAS, or polyfluoroalkyl substances. These are those so-called forever chemicals that are out there. They could come from firefighting foams, from plastics, whatnot. But Mass DEP actually issued a finding, and that's now a regulatory, regulated primary contaminant, even at a higher level. That's whereas the manganese is a secondary contaminant. Those went into effect in October, and I think the population of Medfield would put Medfield's compliance or first round of testing due on April 1st. And then going forward, all communities that have water supply have to test quarterly and have to be below 20 parts per trillion. It's parts per trillion, very, very small concentration. It's a sum of like 6 different PFAS compounds at 20 parts per trillion. Has Medfield tested all of its water supplies as of yet?
Yes, we have. Bill, you want me to take this one?
Sure.
So in January, we tested our first round of PFAS. We try to be proactive. We got Mass DEP to pay for our testing for that first go around. Our results came back favorable. We're below the 20 parts per trillion, the contaminant level, but some were over 10, which they required us to do a confirmatory sampling. We just had that accomplished, and actually the results were actually even lower in our wells. So, but we still have to do 2 to 3 samplings monthly, because we're still over the 10, but under the 20. We're well under the 20, but being over the 10, they still have us do it monthly until they, feel good about the results. And so we're in the safe zone for PFAS, and so 3 of our locations were non-detect. So that's a good sign.
So you don't envision,
I'm sorry, Chairman.
sorry.
Go ahead.
You don't envision this new treatment facility to have any additional treatment added on as a result of PFAS or anything else?
We did account for expansion of this building. We made arrangements with our design engineers to make it expandable for PFAS if needed. So we're looking at options to, in case once our monthly sampling comes along, we don't expect any changes in that, but if it does, we would be able to expand that treatment plan.
Yeah, the DEP actually, is part of the design, put in, whether it was regulation or not, wanted us to make sure that our plant had the ability to accommodate the addition. So if, in layman's terms, to remove something like this man-made chemical, there would need to be a different type of treatment, and probably even more of an absorptive, like activated carbon or something like that. And that would be added either upstream or downstream, be sort of like a bump out of the building. The building's designed so that if we had to do that, it's easy to do that. We have the flanges in place for that. So the Mass DEP brought us down this road architecturally to do that. And so if it became something, then we have the ability of dealing with it.
Great.
So just to follow up on all that lab testing, Mo, I just heard that your FY22 budget for lab fees is going up 10 grand. Is that as a result of?
Oh, you saw that. You saw that, huh?
Yeah. I haven't broken the news to the rest of the gang.
So the first 2 rounds of testing were compliments of Mass DEP. However, because we have to do monthly sampling and quarterly sampling for the other well locations, they added that to as an added cost. They're about $300 for each of our sampling tests, which gets to be expensive. That's why I tried to throw that in at the last minute, unfortunately, because we're mandated to do monthly sampling now.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick question, actually. First, is that This is a great presentation, Bill. It kind of shows the wisdom of Mike Sullivan and how he selects people. So I appreciate the presentation and the clarity for someone like myself. If I think I can understand, I'll be careful. Like I'm sure I don't entirely.
I think we're all students of Mike Sullivan in some way.
And I'd also, being my third year on the Warrant Committee, I do remember back to some of the last sleep from the concern of the unaccounted for water. So I give you and Mo a lot of credit for that progress. That's really terrific. But I have two questions. One is on the contingency. Is that a conservative number, and or is it just historical reference that that's pretty much what you need in a project of this size? So
I believe any kind of project this large, you put a percentage for a contingency just in case for unforeseen things that happen during a large project like this. So it's pretty conservative, but it is a percentage of the project. That's how they determine the contingency.
Sure. And if that were not totally needed, how would those funds be available for you in a future application?
It would be available under a, see if I can get the wording right. It would be for another capital project of basically similar life. So we could not use that for operations. So if we needed, we've got a cast iron pipe that has to be replaced on road XYZ. Yes, it would be available for something like that.
Okay, that's good. And then the last question I had was sort of follow along. I see there's water main and pipeline work to be done, and in its proximity to the Wheelock project. Is there some ability for one to leverage off the other? Because I know that's one of the costs that's included in pipeline and connection. And Mo, I don't know if these are related at all, or if there's an opportunity for some.
They wouldn't
synergy.
they wouldn't be interrelated as far as this project is concerned. With if the school went in, I've talked to Mike Quinlan. We've kind of looked at the proposed design of the schools, and we would coordinate, especially in that area there. That's the only thing that would be kind of affected would be the path of the sewer main going out to Elm Street. As far as a sewer connection to the schools, they would make their own connection into Elm Street through where Stephen Lane is, where the sewer ends right now. It would be extended to our project coming out where the access road is now out to Elm Street there. And the school would probably tie into one of those areas where we've extended it.
Yeah, and it's important to note that from a fiscal basis, we can't commingle the work anyhow, because we have separate enterprise fund, and that's the operating expenses go through the enterprise fund, as well as the debt goes into it's serviced through the enterprise fund. It doesn't come through the general fund. So it would be difficult, even if all the stars aligned, we're doing both projects at the same time, the same contractor working on the project for two different things. I think it would be kind of hard to piece out.
Thank you.
Any other
Yes, have
questions?
Okay, great.
We're all set, Sharon.
Wonderful. I would like to point out that when Jeremy asked his question, it gave me the epiphany that the first time I ever met or saw Jeremy was when he came to talk to the Warrant Committee my first year, and he was on the Water and Sewer Board. And I don't know how I forgot that until like 10 minutes ago. And I'm like, that's where I remember Jeremy from. So, great. And so, since do we want to talk about the stormwater article then, while we have everybody?
Sure. So first I want to thank Mo for having numerous telephone conversations with me and emails to go over the stormwater bylaw amendment. So Medfield currently has a stormwater management bylaw. And basically what that is that it governs the management of like stormwater runoff. So in any kind of development where you're going from pervious to impervious surfaces, the stormwater, it's the management of the stormwater and how that kind of gets caught in like catch basins or, the stormwater drains. Basically, the ultimate purpose is to protect the groundwater and any sort of water bodies. So this amendment is being proposed, and Mo will walk you through like the genesis of the amendment, why it's being requested, and really the three main kind of revisions of it. So Mo, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. This stormwater bylaw amendment, we're trying to cut it down to very minimal changes. And right now with the stormwater management permit, we're required to add and amend our bylaw to add certain characteristics to it. So our consultant and our town council and myself have kind of had Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, trying to, bring it down to a manageable level of changes that we still would be in compliance with Mass DEP and EPA. So there's 3 points to the changes that we're looking at. One is for Stormwater Authority. Right now, everything that in our bylaw says that the Department of Public Works, the director has the authority to do pretty much everything with stormwater. We're trying to spread that authority to different boards and committees that are doing the work already. It's just that they don't have the authority in the bylaw so when they do, site plan reviews, they do public hearings, all that information that they're reviewing the stormwater through those channels, they don't actually have the authority under the bylaw. So we're just trying to manipulate that a little bit to have them to be able to have the authority as well as the DPW director. We don't have that infrastructure in place of boards or committees on the DPW side to handle those kind of things in the first place. So they're doing the work already, but it gives them the authority. The second piece of it is illicit discharges and illicit connections. Anytime, we're trying to protect our waters and not try to get them to be impaired by having people being able to put things into our drainage system or connect to our drainage system. So this is already in our chapter 270. It's not in our stormwater management bylaw in 235. It's in 270 under water pollution abatement. So it is there. So it's just going to be referenced in chapter 230.
Oh, Mo froze. Did you freeze for everybody?
We lost Mo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
35. That's another change. The third
Oh,
thing
there he
is
is.
bodies. Well, I'm sorry.
You
We
froze.
lost you for
Froze
like
for a little
5-10 seconds. You were frozen.
Okay. Well,
Don't worry, it was super flattering.
It's okay. It's all good. Keep going.
the third part of it is the TMDLs, which is total maximum daily load, and those are any pollutants that are added to the water bodies that still were able to be in compliance with water quality standards. So it's the maximum contaminants that's allowable. So that section is being put in as an amendment to our stormwater bylaw, which also puts out to be best management practices to contractors, developers, to make them conform to not to impair our waters. And if our waters are already impaired, to have best management practices to reduce the amount of pollutants that go into our water bodies. So those are the three main things in the amendment. We should have a final version coming out. Actually, I was hoping today, but it looks like the beginning of the week that I could send to you. So you have that on your desk as soon as possible. I do apologize because it's been going for a long time right now, going back and forth, trying to minimize the changes to this amendment. So.
Any questions?
Go ahead, Newton.
Mo, you said you're going to spread the authority around for stormwater authority or management. Who would coordinate is it necessary to coordinate?
It's not necessary to coordinate because the stormwater reviews and the stormwater and site plan, the conservation, planning board, zoning board, they're all doing work with stormwater as it is right now. So it's more just to kind of make it more open to Stormwater Authority, to the people that are doing the work.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I really appreciate you guys taking your time to come.
Thank you all very much.
Randy.
All right. Well,
Thank
good. Well,
you.
thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. You too. Does everybody feel comfortable on voting on these three things tonight? So we would have the water treatment plant, and then I think it's their operating budget article and the stormwater. Does everybody feel okay doing those?
So their operating budget, are you referring to the enterprises?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was just noticing on of course, my computer just froze, but there were three articles, right? There was the treatment plant, and then there was their enterprise
Right.
operating article that was right next to it.
I think we're waiting for more details there to
Okay.
fill out the schedule.
Okay. So we'll just do that, maybe just the water treatment plant and the stormwater article. Does that work for people?
Yes.
Okay. I guess from a water treatment plant perspective, I'll just start off saying that we've been talking about a water treatment plant and how bad this town needs it for the 6+ years I've been sitting on this committee. So I think they've put themselves in a good position to be able to do that. I know that a lot of people in town will say that they definitely felt that rate increase of the two big ones in the last couple of years. So always happy to hear that their plan is to level off and still be able to do it. So I thought that was good to hear, because I don't think people would be too happy getting another really large rate increase. So I'm glad to see that they've done that in advance to do it. I also think that if we don't do it, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. So that's my opinion.
Jeremy, do you share that?
Yeah, I do. There's a lot of thought and expertise has gone into this plan and this design. Many alternatives considered, alternatives to a treatment plan altogether. And, we're all rolled out, and, this, and it was good to hear that, really they're accommodating, current and, changing regulations. Good to hear the numbers were actually kind of low or lower, not above the limit for PFAS in Medfield. But yeah, I agree. Great presentation. Agree with everything that was contained in it. I personally support the treatment plan.
That's the stamp of approval.
There you go.
Between the boss lady shirt and Jeremy's approval, I don't know how I could take another position. I don't know.
Madam Chairman, I'd like
You're
to
allowed to.
I'd like to make a motion.
Go right ahead, Newton. What would you like to move?
Well, I'd like to move that we vote on Article 14 to see if the town will appropriate and borrow or transfer money for the water enterprise from the fund for the purposes of constructing a water treatment plant off of Elm Street.
Is there a second?
I also, seeing Newton's quality of questioning, I would say that's the third vote for me. So I second.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So Ed Vizella,
Yes.
Boone Thompson,
Yes.
Bob Sliney,
Yes.
Amanda Hall,
Yes.
Jeremy Marset,
Yes.
Christine Barton,
Yes.
Sharon Tatro, and I am a yes. And we voted on an article.
Yeah, that's a
That's
great
all.
job.
I know. Great. Okay.
presentation.
How about stormwater? Anybody have? Christine, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is required by the EPA to amend, because I know a lot of other municipalities are amending their stormwater bylaws too. And then the main revisions that Mo talked about make sense. So I'm in favor.
Jeremy?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Supported.
motion to approve, I don't know what article it is, but the stormwater bylaw amendment.
It probably has a different number and we don't have a current list, so we're just gonna call it. Christine's been busy on other things, which I will explain in a minute. This is why we don't have another article set for tonight. So I think calling it the stormwater bylaw is probably sufficient. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, okay, so Ed Vizella,
Yes.
Noon Thompson,
Yes.
Bob Sliney,
Yes.
Amanda Hall,
Yes.
Jeremy Marset,
Yes.
and Christine Barton.
Yes.
Okay. So before we kind of get, I know I had said we were going to have like a spreadsheet and we were going to go through a scenario and all of that. Well, we don't have that because there's been a tremendous amount of meetings and then a memo I forwarded to you all during this meeting that just came up. So I want to kind of catch everybody up as to where we're at. So Ed and I met with Mike LaFrancesca and Jeff Marsden and Megan Glenn on Tuesday morning. My days are all getting pushed together. And so
We all goofed up.
I don't know. At some
Thursday
point this
meeting
week, yeah, we met. And so because for those of you, and we might have mentioned this some on Monday, honestly, I'm getting completely confused as to what we've talked about, what we haven't. So I may repeat myself. So just bear with me for a minute. They had talked a little bit about at the school committee meeting last week about the fact that they had made some changes to how they were doing things over at the schools, and it sounded like they were alluding to the fact that they might not need Article 7. When Ed and I met with them, they did confirm that they have done several things to their budget so that they will not need Article 7. And a memo was sent to us about right before this meeting. I forwarded it all to you at 7 o'clock, so it's in your emails and you haven't read it yet. But what that says in general is there is a lot of very specific things that they did not have to spend money on, or there was also a very large credit that they were able to receive from special ed transportation that is going to be able to help offset about $800,000 in extra expenses. So due to that, the schools do not have an overage for Article 7, which we all know we were planning that number to be somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000 to have to come out of free cash. So that means that the amount that was the extra government aid Chapter 70 piece that we have been collecting this year, but was not in the budget, will actually fall to free cash. And so I'm going to follow up after this meeting because I have not had a chance to speak to Jess Riley or Megan Glenn yet on the school committee since I saw it right before, because when Ed and I had talked to Megan and Jeff and Michael, we had asked them if they could put together a list so we could really understand what it was why they weren't going to need it. I honestly read it pretty quickly. Nick does have a copy. We could bring it up on the screen if we want to look at it in detail, or we could all just kind of digest it and talk a little bit more about it on Monday. Because where I'm going with this is that because they are not taking, or it looks like we are potentially going to be able to pull Article 7. So I'm going to talk to Jess and Megan and make sure they feel that same way, and then the selectmen can talk about it too on Tuesday. And if that's how we feel, then Article 7 won't be. Then how do we treat that? How do we treat that, and what does that do to our 420 that we're over? And so that becomes kind of a whole nother different piece of it. So I've been playing a little bit with the what we can afford. And so the 420 that we've all talked about, and what I would like to, I want to propose a couple of things. I think if they're not going to need Article 7, we definitely have some funds to play with. But to my point on Monday, where I still want to be completely fiscally responsible at everything that we're voting for, because I don't want us to say, oh, the schools aren't going to need Article 7, so we could just use the whole 420. I would like to be smart about that. So the few things that I wanted to propose that we at least had a conversation about tonight were, rather than, I know I said I was kind of going to go through a spreadsheet and do a whole, but since we don't have that, off the top of my head, I have a few things that stick out to me that I think that would be good to talk about. One would be the planning board article. Although I think it's a great idea, I think it could probably wait, and we might be able to put that 20K to the side. I personally think we should also talk about the Selectmen Economic Vitality article, the 15K, because it sounds like that balance is really pretty high right now, since some of the things that were in that we were able to get through CARES. So that's probably another 15K. I also would like to talk about the public health nurse, because that's the only new position that's in this budget. And my personal opinion is, I think it's great. I think we need a public health nurse. I do think from conversations that I've heard, I do believe there's an application for a grant out there. We've all kind of heard that maybe there's going to be something regionally, maybe, whether or not that makes sense for us or not. So if this grant out there is perhaps for 50% of that cost, then it would probably make sense for us to pull that line item back by what that expected grant is, so that we're not building the budget off of an amount of money that we don't need right now. And I guess my opinion is, worst case scenario, if that grant fell through, half of a public health nurse is something that we could have a discussion next year about whether or not that's a reserve fund transfer to help finish funding that, whether or not that's some of the CARES money. And then if that grant won't roll over when we're talking about the budget for the year after, and we've already hired a full-time public health nurse, then we raise it up, similar to what happened a couple of years ago when we, on the budget, we had underfunded the outreach position by 20K, and then we put it back in. So those were kind of my bigger thoughts about that. So if you took those out, it's going, if we took all three of those out, it probably puts the overage closer to 350-ish, 380 or 350. I'm doing the math in my head, which is bad, but it's probably about 350. And so if we took an extra 350 out of free cash, if we added that in, we would have a reserve policy change. But I don't think any of you were on the committee the first year that we had a really big problem with the budget, which was, I think, probably the first year that Christine and I did it together, and Nick wasn't here yet. When
Year 20.
Yeah, that was the year that I told all of my clients that I had the flu, and I spent the entire week with Christine and Georgia and Jeff and everybody over at Town Hall. And what we had done that year to help be able to hit the reserve fund and still balance budget was we counted in reserves money that we were positive was coming back. And so in that in particular year, we had budgeted for the position that Nick ended up taking, but we never filled it. So there was like a few unfunded positions. There was like an exact amount of money that we were 100% positive was coming into free cash. So given the memo that kind of has just come from Jeff Marsden that says they're not going to need Article 7, really that $680,000 that was that state aid is guaranteed money that's coming in. So if we went back to that theory and put that in, we will meet the fiscal policy on both sides of the free cash and the reserves. If we add in that number, as we 100% know that's coming back, and then we fund our overage with that. And so I will say I've run some quick numbers, and I think that we would be able to meet the fiscal policy if we did the 420 or if we did this lower 350. So it's not like I'm proposing that we make those cuts in order to meet the fiscal policy, I'm proposing that we talk about those things just to be fiscally responsible, not necessarily to meet the policy. Because I do think that there's a way to meet the policy both ways. If we add this, we 100% know this 680 is coming back because Article 7 doesn't exist. I know that was a lot to just dump out on everybody.
My head is blowing up. No, couple of questions on that. First of all, I know we don't go through all the details, but I just read that this, in the letter, the number one item is a one-time opportunity to prepay. So that reflects that it's a prepayment of a 2022 expense that's in the budget. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of it, but Mike, no.
I don't think so. I think I definitely want to meet with Mike because I just saw this, at the same time you did practically 5:30 whenever we got this, and I really need to go and sit with him and understand some of these line items. That's the first of which, but I think the answer to that, Bob, is no. I went back to the schedule that I presented, a couple back in February, and you could see that in 2020, the transportation expense was basically more than double what it was the prior year. I think the prepayment was the end of 2020, and that's why that number was so high. But that just leads me to another question that I wanted to pose to Mike, and that is, well, I think what probably happened is they prepaid it, but it was after the 2021 budget was put to bed because they didn't prepay it till August. So the 21 budget was already put to bed. And so therefore they had extra money in 21, and now they're going to receive the credit. And I guess the budget for 21, in my mind, must have been overstated, but I want to clarify that with Mike so I understand.
Yeah,
I think that's probably right, Ed, just because I believe that Mike had said when we had talked to them that they basically had overcharged them. It's like they do an estimate and then based on our uses, there was like this overcharge, which is part of what this credit. That's what I thought I heard, but I think you're right. I think we need to clarify.
Yeah, I don't think it's.
I'm sorry, I don't want to jump into the weeds on that. It was just one thing that struck out. And you guys you've done a great job with the communication and the work that's come up. So I know it's premature. The comment I'd make, Sharon, on your overview is perhaps considering, from my perspective, if there are areas in the revenue, whether it's local receipts or something like that, that, are short because of COVID, situation, that we would expect next year that those revenues would come back up to a level. I could see that as being an offset in the use of funds similar to a cost cut, because I think, it's the other side of the run rate. So I
think Christine raised some of those local receipts already to get. Is that part of how we got to the 420?
If there would have been anticipated growth that is not in that number, but we would expect it to come in next year, that would be similar in my mind to a cost cut in terms of run rate. I'm still concerned about using the available free cash to affect the current deficit, while seeing that in the future we're going to inherit that issue again. Does that make sense?
With that,
In other words, take cost cuts. I would like us to see taking cost cuts because that's the fiscal discipline. But if there are shortfalls in revenue that create some of the deficit that we could say are related to the COVID, and that in the next year we would see that growth come back, I see that as the flip side of a cost cut. That makes sense?
I'm sorry. No, you lost me. Did he lose anybody else?
No, he said instead of cutting.
I love you, Bob, but I lost you.
Well, that's okay.
Is there an opportunity to revisit the assumptions around revenue? Now, you did that recently.
I think that you did that, right?
well,
Christine?
I'm Bob, clarify this for me. Are you talking about overall town revenue, or are you talking about the school revenue and Ed's revolving funds that he presented?
No, I'm talking about the overall town revenue.
Overall town revenue, we increased, I think I presented it last week or the week before. I don't anticipate increasing that again.
No, okay, but let's say in a normal year, some receipts might grow, and I don't even know what the numbers are. I'm not looking at them, but if we build our budget for 3% growth and we don't have, and because of COVID, some revenue coming to the town is 1%.
Right.
Post-COVID, it comes back to 3. I'm saying covering that with the free cash, to me, is similar to a cost cut. The flip side of a cost cut. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
So I think, and I think this might be a conversation that you and I had, and I think this is what you're hitting on, and that when we were originally talking about the budget, we were talking about absolutely no free cash to offset the operating budget, had to meet the financial policy, and we've built that budget up until this point. I think some of the discussions that have been happening since last Friday are, if we have this stimulus money coming in, we don't have any rules or regulations on it. We had a little teaser conference this afternoon. We were supposed to get more information, but we're still waiting for the Treasury. One of the things they keep talking about is loss of revenue and whether or not you can use that stimulus money for loss of revenue. So I think that's actually is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that'd be in that vein.
So I have not taken, obviously Sharon asked me to run some numbers. So I asked Nick to run some numbers. So having said that, I have not been able to share this with the Board of Selectmen to talk about whether or not we should be using free cash. I know that we had a brief discussion similar to I had with you on Tuesday. We talked about waiting to see until we got the Treasury guidelines before we made any promises for the money. I don't want to say we can use it to offset, the shortfall in revenue and offset this year's budget, and then find out 3 weeks from now, after we've gone to print for the warrant, after we've got everything ready, that that's actually not an allowable item.
Sure. No, absolutely.
Because then we're going to be right back where we are. So I think that, Sharon, that's where your idea of using the free cash is coming from, to offset the budget, meet the financial policy, and then see what we are allowed to do with the stimulus funds. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, that's basically what yes. Right. And that's why I'm saying add this line in that's equal to what we all had kind of set aside in our heads would be what Article 7 was going to be. But if we're not going to have Article 7, then we are going to have this to help us fix the problem.
Correct.
Without having to
Isn't
cut
that-
anything of substance or.
Right. Because
go
my
back.
broken record all year has been next year is our really bad year.
Right.
So having, this would be helpful.
That Article 7 money, 2 questions. That's coming out of Chapter 70, is that correct?
So
It
it's actually Chapter 70 and local government aid, unrestricted government aid. And that money, we reduced what we anticipated getting from the state at last year's town meeting by 10% across the board. And then they came through with the full amount of our state aid. There was some discussions whether or not we should have a special town meeting to appropriate that 115,000 or so back to the town, and the rest of the money for Chapter 70 back to the schools. We had that joint meeting in the fall where we determined that the best thing to do would be to have an article at the annual to cover any COVID related expenses, which is why Michael LaFrancesca has been preparing spreadsheets that he's been presenting to the school committee, and I believe he's presented to the warrant committee, showing what those anticipated expenses could be based on COVID, so that we would know what we would have for that article. So it's helpful that that article would not move forward, obviously.
So does that money have restrictions to it? Can it only be used for education?
No.
Okay.
Because I think in Newton, I think this is the way I think that Chapter 70 does have to be used for the schools, but really what's been happening is we have been, right? Because we've been receiving it, but other money that we have been taking in, we haven't needed. So the whole point is like the difference of that money is what we have.
Far in excess of what we're required to spend.
Right.
Yeah.
But if the bottom line is it all falls, this extra money to free cash, can that be used to meet our operating budget deficit?
That's what I'm suggesting. That's exactly what I'm
Isn't that
suggesting.
a breach of financial policy?
That is, yes, if we put it as a separate line item, that we say, this is coming in as free cash, we're 100% positive of it. If we put that in there, we will meet fiscal policy if we want to solve the deficit of 420 with that. So whether or not we solve it for 420, we decide to make a few cuts and it's really a 350, we will meet both. So here's the difference. The reason why you have to put the 680 in there is because if you want to fix the whole 420, but you don't recognize that that 680 is coming in, we would meet the free cash policy, but we would not meet the reserve policy. Because like the reserve policy has to be at minimum of 7.5% of expenditures. If we paid the 420 and we didn't recognize the 680, I think that falls below the 7.5, like closer to a 7.2. But since we all know if Article 7 doesn't exist, this 680 is hitting free cash. And so it will be part of the reserves. So if we put that in there and recognize that, and if we paid the entire 420, it would actually put the reserves at closer to a little over 8%. And it would keep the free cash over 2.5 at almost 4. So we actually would be totally fine.
I'm going to throw, as I do on occasion, another wrench in there, because I know Nick doesn't have enough to do anyway. But at our last meeting, the capital budget was discussed.
Yeah, I have something to say about that too. But yeah, go
it
ahead.
has been raised in the past that, you know, the reliance on leasing as opposed to buying outright through the capital budget. Is there some ability to use this money that has become now available for some use to be applied in addressing that issue?
I'm going to simply say yes, because what happened kind of all on, again, all days mixed together, but apparently myself and Christine and Mike Marcucci and Mike LaFrancesco, we were all thinking the same thing. And then all of a sudden, everybody was like, what do you think about this? And I'm like, I was going to tell you that. And I was going to tell you that. So I believe that the initial discussions is that Nick has been tasked with figuring out what should be the dollar amount that we are not going to lease the cars for, and figure out what we can afford and come back. And I think we're going to have to potentially have another capital budget committee meeting. But the proposals anyway are to, if we have a little extra of this, use some of that. If we're going to be able to use some of the stimulus, use that for some of that, and be able to get through the, and not lease so much stuff. Because when Ed and I met with the schools on Tuesday morning, Mike LaFrancesco was like, can I just mention that maybe we shouldn't lease everything now? And I was like, oh, I was thinking the same thing. And then the next morning I got an email from Mike Marcucci, was like, I'm thinking maybe we should lease everything now. And then Christine's like,
Wow,
yeah, I think so too.
I'm in pretty
you're good.
rarefied company right now.
And I might have even emailed Jeremy and said, Jeremy, I think maybe
I
we
was
should
just
lease
trying to
everything
keep, I was
now.
trying to just keep Jeremy happy. Look at that.
I did send a note to Jeremy, and he and I haven't connected on it yet, so I do want to table that discussion too, because I think we need to redo that. And I think we have to have a capital budget meeting somehow squeezed in.
I think one of the most, again, I just say that one of the very, very encouraging pieces of this is how in the last 2 years, really trying to work towards the one town approach, you know, that you and Ed have been able to do with the school committee, and what the school committee, you know, Mike and Jeff and their team have done. It's great progress. It really is. So it's working together, making some progress.
So yeah, so that's kind of what I'm suggesting. I don't think Amanda had to drop out, so Newton for minutes. Amanda had to leave at 8:30. But I really just wanted, like, Jeremy or Christine, do you have any thoughts on my brain dump or any other brilliant ideas? Because I think what I would like to do is for us to, in a sense, almost give like our marching orders in a sense to Christine and Nick to help put together scenarios so we could talk about it again on Monday, and then maybe be in a position to vote on something on Thursday next week. But clearly we have a gazillion moving parts that I think all end in a good place. It's just about how we want to get there. So, okay. Ed, did you have something else?
Yeah, question for Christine. I don't know if you had a chance to look at how the schools were going to try and resolve that $869,000 overage. But one of the line items was an ESSER grant. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
ESSER 2? Because we've never talked about that in the past, that I'm aware of.
That was on the CARES spreadsheet that I sent everybody. It's at the bottom.
I went back and checked that, and I saw that, on there about an hour ago. But is that something new?
No, I think
Has that been around all year?
So we got CARES in May, right? And then I think we had the 502 grant came first to the schools, and then the ESSER 1 was in the, I want to say right in the spring, and then ESSER 2 was probably in the fall.
Was the
I don't remember the dates, to be honest.
the second of the 3 stimulus packages.
Okay.
Federal money that was approved in, I think, November, December, and signed at that point and released.
Okay, because I think when Mike was reviewing this with us and remember, we were looking at the first two, the 102 and the $565,000 grant, whatever that one was, that case. And he was projecting as he had fully expended both of those. And at that time, we didn't have these ESSER grants.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, that's been
So
the
that would,
hard
so
part
that would
about.
make sense. So he was, okay, and he had fully expended those and still expected to spend an additional 500,000 to 600,000 beyond from January 1st to June 30. So now it's beginning to make a little bit more sense. So now he can use that ESSER grant to offset those overages. All right, I'm beginning to connect the dots. Thank you.
Cool. Do people have, I mean, I know Amanda had to drop out, so, but do we want to talk about like the planning board or the economic vitality or anything like that? Or you want to just kind of table it till Monday? So Monday, we're going to have the 2 citizen petitions. The Historic District Commission is not going to be coming. They're not ready yet. So I have communicated with the people that would like to come and talk on Monday. So we'll do those first. So for the first hour and 15 minutes or so, we're going to be doing that because Mark Sorrell is going to come at the beginning and answer any of our legal questions about it. And then we are going to do the 2 petitions. Mike Quinlan is going to be in our peanut gallery to answer any specific questions because he was one of the authors of the bylaw that has to do with the citizen petition. But he is not coming to make any kind of presentation or speech of any kind. He just is willing to be available to us to answer questions. Is there anybody else besides him that people want me to ask to be able to be here besides? So we have Mike Sorrell and Mike Quinlan coming, and then the people for the articles and against the articles are
No, I think that's good. And Sharon, to your point earlier, you've talked about the planning board, the selectmen, and the public health, and we've had conversations on that. And candidly, I think as you go back and and working with other people, it might be to our advantage. I know if the Warrant Committee, was committed to that $70K cut in the operating budget of the town, and my opinion is it would be helpful. I'm ready to say those are cuts that we should work on, and if that helps as we go forward to say, yeah, we're making our cuts here or the cuts to the operating budget here as a starting point. I personally would be comfortable going with your recommendation there or your plan.
Does anybody hate it? You're welcome to say you hate it. I just have a boss lady shirt. I'm not really the boss lady.
Yes, you are.
I guess I'd feel more comfortable when everything else is near final, and those are the only attributes or elements that are in question, including the diagnostic and I guess Affordable Housing Trust as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, 'cause they're in there too. We haven't voted on that one yet either.
Right.
Okay. I mean, Jeremy or Christine, you guys have any thoughts or other ideas you have, or you want to just wait and we'll talk about it when we get better numbers?
It sounds like a good approach to me. And kind of balanced and kind of up with, available funds of the time. So
Yeah.
it'd be good to have it all worked up, and see what it looks like.
Do that.
All right. Well, since we've been keeping Christine busy on other things, we don't have any other articles I think we can talk about tonight. So we can probably all enjoy our evenings 20 minutes earlier, unless anybody else has anything else they want to talk about tonight. All righty then. So Monday we will, as I said, we'll do citizens petitions, and then maybe we'll have a spreadsheet or not to talk about. Maybe we'll have warrant articles we can talk about or not. And then Thursday we'll try to get through the rest of them. And then worst case scenario, we'll meet the Wednesday, whatever it is, the 31st. But maybe we'll have enough that we'll be able to get through it all next week. Because Christine's going to work all weekend. And so.
I'm going to work all weekend.
Cool. All right. Well, Bob, do you want to make your favorite motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Have we approved?
Oh,
the minutes?
wait. We didn't do
We didn't
minutes.
approve the minutes.
That's right. We didn't do the minutes. So we are going to do the minutes. Does anybody have any questions on Newton's glorious minutes? Okay.
I would motion to approve the minutes for March 15th as submitted.
Okay.
Second.
There. All right. So Ed Vizella,
Yes.
Newton Thompson,
Yes.
Bob Sliney,
Yes.
Gary Morissette,
Yes.
Christine Barton,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes. Okay. All right. So now, Bob, you can make your favorite motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Ed Vizella,
Yes.
Newton Thompson,
Yes.
Bob Sliney,
Yes.
Jeremy Morissette,
Yes.
Christine Barton,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So to be continued, my friends.
Keep
To be
it up.
continued.
Great job. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Okay.
boss lady.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.